Orange pill, orange pill, orange pill. All right, well, this is an Orange Pill podcast special. We are going to speak to Knut Svanholm, who says, by the way, on his Twitter bio, imagine everything there is and everything that will ever be divided by 21 million. So Knut, yes, you have a new book out, Bitcoin, Everything Divided by 21 Million. So that's the title of your new book. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's a new book. Since the meme took off as it did, I had to write the book before someone else did. So I quit my fiat job half a year ago, and been writing ever since. Well, I haven't been that disciplined, but I've been writing every now and then, and it turned into a book, and I'm releasing it during the conference in Miami here in 2 weeks. So I'm bringing a bunch of these t-shirts and a bunch of books, and I'll be signing books on Thursday and Friday during the conference at some special booth there they set up for me. So I'm very happy for that. And I'm happy. The book has a foreword by Jeff Booth as well, and the artwork is by Fractal Encrypt, who made this. Maybe you heard the story about the little art piece, the infinity keys. So there's the story about that in the book as well, and hopefully some fresh ideas. Some are my own and some are inspired by others, and I'm trying to put a philosophical framework around Bitcoin and its potential to incorporate everything at some point in the future.
So everything is Bitcoin. Everything will be priced in Bitcoin. 21 million, of course, is the number of Bitcoin that there will ever be. So you're saying, I assume, if everything is divided by 21 million, that forget this notion of a total addressable market. Everything is the addressable market. The entirety of everything you know around you will be priced in Bitcoin. It won't be priced in gold. It won't be priced in dollars. It won't be priced in any fiat. Is that what you're saying? All fiat disappears very soon?
Maybe. I'm saying we might need a new unit of account, because as I see it, hyperbitcoinization is 1 divided by hyperinflation. It's like the literal inverse of hyperinflation. So I think a hyperbitcoinizing scenario will be as weird to live in as hyperinflation is. Imagine your wealth doubling every now and then, because I think this can play out a lot faster than people in general think. Because when you realize how infinitely valuable Bitcoin can really become, there's you feel an urge to acquire as much as you can. And as you know, there are many hodlers of last resort out there, and we're growing stronger every day. So we're on the path.
So hyper Bitcoinization is the same as hyper deflation.
Yeah, you could say that. And as I view it, there can only be one deflationary currency. It's a winner take all game, of course, because if there are more than one, it wouldn't really be deflationary. And in the same way, I argue in the book that the double spending problem that Bitcoin, or like the blockchain, claims to have solved isn't really solved until post hyper Bitcoinization. When every other currency that can be duplicated or conjured out of thin air or counterfeited, every time you use a currency like that that is inflationary, you are not helping solving the actual double spending problem. So the double spending problem is tied to hyper Bitcoinization in a sense. So I try to explain these ideas and explore them to explore the idea vectors to wherever they lead me. And
so in other words, when you look at these other altcoins as they're known, or fiat money, or even gold, they become derivatives of Bitcoin, but eventually that derivative market disappears.
Yeah, eventually. But this may take 10 years or 10,000 years. We don't know for sure, of course. And people will trade other stuff than Bitcoin. So yeah, it's a weird thing to think about, a deflationary global currency.
So it's perfect. Would you say it's perfect deflation? I mean, that's just a phrase I'm throwing out there without a lot of, I'm just wondering, how would you respond to a phrase like that? Perfect deflation.
Well, I'd like to tie that to it. If you can bear with me for a while, I'd like to tie that to another idea in the book, which is the idea of Bitcoin as a new element, a chemical element without mass. If you were to design an element on the periodic table, I argue that is what the alchemists should have been doing instead of trying to find a way to create gold. Because if they would have found a way to create gold in a cheap way, without cost, then they would have destroyed the value of gold in the process, because they would have destroyed the stock to flow ratio. So what they should have been looking for is the properties of gold. And that is basically what Satoshi found when he discovered Bitcoin and the time chain. Because you can view it as an element without protons or neutrons. So this is an element without mass, but it does have some resemblance to a chemical element in that it takes a lot of energy to destroy it. Some would say an infinite amount, and it can also bind energy. And this goes back to your old favorite thought of mine, that knowing is owning thing. Because the information about this element, when you found when you can prove that you've found the location of the element, you've found the element. The information about the element is the element, since it's a purely informational element. And this is what blurs out the line between the mental and the physical in a way. So, and this is what upsets so many people when I tweeted yesterday that Bitcoin does not consume energy, but it converts and stores it. Many of the physics, what's the word? Well, people that care a lot about physics think I go against all, common sense and the laws of thermodynamics and everything.
Let's talk about that for a second, because what you're describing there sounds more like physics and less like chemistry. And so if you're saying that Bitcoin is dematerialization and perfect deflation, it's almost like you're saying it's anti-money versus money.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. What I'm trying to get across is that everyone is underestimating the SAT squeeze, because you have 8 billion people and 21 million Bitcoin, of which 90% have already been mined. So eventually people will lose Bitcoin over time. So the percentage of Bitcoin that will come off market because people hodl them or lose them or whatever will just be enormous. The actual amount of Bitcoins on the market will shrink at a faster rate than people think. And this, you have the increasing demand on one side and the diminishing supply, even diminishing supply, not limited supply, but diminishing supply on the other side. And you get this freakish price rise at some point.
So let's talk about physics for a second and the thermodynamics. People in the know tend to talk about Bitcoin in terms of the second law of thermodynamics, which I believe is the conservation of energy. And you're saying, can you just review that a little bit? Because what exactly, how are you making a departure there?
It's connected to both the first and the second law of thermodynamics. Like the law of energy can never be created nor destroyed. It can just be converted into different types of energy. And what physics nerds have a problem with, and I do too, is like saying that the electrical energy is converted into monetary energy, because there's no such thing as monetary energy in physics. However, I still like to make that argument that since what you're effectively doing when getting the value out of the Bitcoin created by sacrificing electricity is that you're enabling someone to spend that somewhere else. So in a sense, it is converting it into subjective energy, if you will, or digital energy, or whatever you may call it.
Right. So just to pick up on that point a little bit. So you are equating money essentially to information, and the energy is being converted into a different form of information. It never stops being information, number one. And how does this relate to the uncertainty principle? Certainly, you're saying that it's there because we observe it to be there, therefore it exists. And a lot of people say that's the definition of money. If people think it's money, it's money.
Well, that's the definition of everything if you go deep enough, because now you're in the quantum physics realm, where at the deepest layer of reality, you have something called the Higgs field, where there's a vast ocean of uncertainty. And until you measure a particle, if it exists or not, it's in a qubit state, which is both a 0 and a 1 at the same time, both true and false. But as soon as it's measured, it turns into one of these states. This is I'm talking about the Planck length now, the smallest unit of information there is in the universe. So even physical objects, everything is just made up of information at its core. So it makes perfect sense to find an element that can be expressed through information only, through data only. And this is what Bitcoin is. It is a new element in this sense. And the information about it is the element. When you've proven that you've found it, by doing the proof of work and showing that you have a hash beginning with X amount of zeros, you have proven that you're the legit owner and of this element, and no one can take it from you because you're the one with the private key if you have the block reward and the block subsidy. So it's not really my opinion. It is a reality we have to adapt to. There now exists an informational element, whether we like it or not. And of course, these are just my words of describing what this phenomenon is. You can describe it in very many ways, as you know, but I think it provides a nice framework.
So you're talking, okay, about the supply side of the equation in terms of there's 21 million, there's a finite supply, and it's information. Let's talk about the demand side for a second. So what drives the demand for Bitcoin? And is there such a thing, as I've thought about myself, curious what you think, where Bitcoin triggers in humans, and humans, if to continue on your thought there, are basically packets of information, right? The human is a packet of information. The mind is essentially information, packets of information. Does Bitcoin do something to the human mind, which is to trigger infinite demand to go along with this infinite deflation? Is it uniquely appealing to our species?
I think it is, but I would articulate that in another way. I would say that it's a perfect representation of the scarcity of our lifetimes. So each and every one of us has one absolutely scarce resource, and that is our time on this earth. And I talk about this a lot in the book. Like, imagine if you could live forever and you were indestructible. So then you could postpone everything until tomorrow, and you would never have to worry about anything because you could always postpone everything indefinitely. So what gives our lives value and why we do stuff at all is because of this limited time we have on this earth. So in that sense, I think the thought of an afterlife is an existential money printer, if you will, because money is supposed to be a representation of that time. And so I argue in the book for Bitcoin being the perfect representation of the scarcity of all our lives. And it's not only our lives, but our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives. So once you realize how huge this idea is, yes, I do think it drives something. It changes you more than you can change it, definitely. And I also argue in the book for it being in a symbiotic relationship with you, since if your head is the only place where your private key exists and you die, your Bitcoins die with you. They literally die with you. But the value of the network on a whole stays the same. So each remaining Bitcoin increases in value when Bitcoins are taken off the market. And in this sense, hodling is different than saving in this sense, because saving, you save stuff in order to sell at a later point. But hodling, inanimate objects can hodl. Dead people can hodl. Imagine Hal Finney, he cryo froze his head before he died. Imagine that he memorized a private key and we find out a way to resurrect him in like 500 years. And his mind remembers this key so he can unlock the Bitcoin after having been resurrected in a different body. I mean, you literally are your Bitcoin. There is no distinction between you and your Bitcoin. It's the same entity in a way. And right now, Bitcoin needs you and your mind in order for Bitcoin to survive. It needs people. But at some point in the future, people will need Bitcoin to survive also. Like it will go the other way around as well.
Okay, well, now when you get into these, let's call it philosophical thoughts, it does start to bleed into the common consensus in terms of what represents value. So I think another problem with the dematerialization of money versus, let's say, objects and material wealth is that people tend to associate their value with their material goods. If you're saying that Bitcoin is more physics than chemistry and that it's part of the dematerialized infinite present that we are going to gravitate toward, then the idea of values change as well. So how will our values change in this environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, every deliberate human action is preceded by a value judgment. So everything we do in life, before we do it, we decide that that's the most valuable thing for us to do right now. Like right now, I value talking to you guys more than going into the kitchen and making myself a sandwich. That might not be the best of compliments, but it illustrates the thing I'm talking about. Like every action is preceded by a value judgment. And if you have a type of money, I mean, it is hard for people to wrap their heads around this because it's such an abstract concept. I mean, you can throw a dice 99 times and create a Bitcoin private key, derive the public key, and receive whatever amount of money you want in an SMS. You can toss a coin 256 times and receive whatever amount of money you want and cross a border, any border in the world. So it blurs out, like humans are so glad we're so keen to put things in neat little boxes and say, this is life, this is death, this is time, this is money, this is this, and this is that. Well, what Bitcoin is doing right now is blurring out the lines between not only knowing and owning, but it's making people question what they actually value in life. I'm a perfect example of it. I think I sold my time I too cheaply before when I had the fiat job. So, and I think everyone underestimates the value of their time because you have one shot at life. You better do something with it. It's not a rehearsal. And maybe this is a roundabout answer to your question, but I think in time people will value Bitcoin more because it's such a perfect representation of this scarcity of time. And I think Bitcoin's price, as Jeff Booth says, it's a lagging indicator of people's understanding of money or people's understanding of values.
So when you talk about that symbiotic relationship between the individual and Bitcoin, what about Bitcoin and the global, the society and the fabric of everything monetary and financial and economic? So one can't help but notice that there's a great deal of entropy and disintegration happening in the world, whether it's all the lockdowns, the pandemics, the wars, the money printing. It seems that there's a lot of chaos when you look outside the world of Bitcoin Twitter, for example. You look out there and you just go, oh my God, like what is going on? Did Bitcoin cause that to happen? Did it accelerate that timeline? It was inevitable, I'm assuming, but like, what's that relationship between Bitcoin and that fiat world?
I don't think it accelerated the fiat decay at all. I think the fiat decay was already there and would have happened anyway. What it did is provide some of us with an airbag or a parachute to dampen the inevitable collapse that is happening everywhere. And because Bitcoin helps the mind see the signal through the noise. And that's why Bitcoiners have been so much better at predicting the outcomes of the lockdowns and of everything in this, and been on the forefront of the thinking around mass psychosis and all these things that are scary things. And the world is a scary place. And some people have too much power, and Bitcoin provides us with a tool to bypass those with a lot of power, while at the same time disempowering them by not using their money, which they can print more of and thereby steal all of our time. So I think Bitcoin is a safety net in that sense and not a trigger.
But now money is famously not a science, a hard science. It's a social science. And so you can't do an experiment in an economy and have the same results every time, because humans are unpredictable. So for this reason, you say, well, the economics and the field of economics, the dismal science, is more of a social science. It's not a hard science like chemistry. But what you're talking about is really a bridge toward money as something more like physics. It has absolute scarcity. You have the verification process that happens every 10 minutes. The emission schedule is hard coded. So it does become, money does become a science to a degree. It becomes like physics. And the question is, I guess, a roundabout way, but the truth as represented by Bitcoin is immutable. There's an immutable truth there. And are we as a species all going to be moving toward thinking about essentially one truth? And, I'd like to think of this in terms of, let's call it the Bitcoin singularity, where essentially you have our species is vibing on one truth. And is that brings up a whole different vector to explore. But what do you think about that?
First of all, money can be a hard science if you view it through a praxeological lens. And you could argue that praxeology is a social science, but it's as far as you can go towards a hard science as possible. And praxeology states, of course, that you can't quantify economics in the sense that other economic schools try to do, and try to measure things other than people's individual value scale hierarchies. So the if you want to go as hard science as you possibly can in the field of economics, you should study Austrian economics. So that's the first thing. And yes, I do believe that Bitcoin will make us lean towards a truth singularity, as you speak of, in the sense that Bitcoin is nothing but an agreement between people on a fixed set of rules. That's what it is. Every Bitcoiner agrees to follow a specific set of rules. That's all we do when we use Bitcoin. We're agreeing with each other. And so we will agree on that part of the truth. But of course, we will have other opinions about stuff. I mean, some people will believe in one God, some people will be atheists, some people will believe in multiple deities, some people will believe in superheroes. I don't know. People will have different opinions on stuff. But this specific truth about how to coordinate human action, if we're on a Bitcoin standard, we by definition agree on this fixed set of rules. So yes, there is a singularity there.
Wow. Well, this is a singular moment which we must conclude this episode of Orange Pill Podcast. Now that we're also translating this, having it subtitled into Spanish to keep our Spanish-speaking community involved.
Perfect.
Shorten the time frame to, something subtitleable. So thank you so much, Knut Svanholm, and we look forward to seeing you at Bitcoin 2022.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing you too as well, of course. And I'll be there. Bring the books and the t-shirts.
Hold up your book one more time.
Yeah. Here it is. This is just a proofreading copy. That's why it has this line through it, but this is what it'll look like.
All right.
And you got the equation there and everything.
Nice.
Divided by 21 million. So looking forward to seeing what the community thinks about this one.
Okay. Well, see you next time, everybody.
All right. Thanks.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Orange Pill Podcast. Make sure you join our Telegram community, t.me/Orange Pill. Support, of course, our sponsors who helped bring this episode to you. And that is swanbitcoin.com/Orange Pill or foldapp.com/Orange Pill. You stack your sats at swanbitcoin.com and then you earn some Bitcoin with your consumption, your purchases, everyday consumer purchases with your Fold card.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm going to do that right now.
Let's go spend some money.
All right. Bye.